What are we going to talk about today? So SharePoint is a wonderful system. For those of you that are here to talk about SharePoint and interested in hearing what SharePoint is all about, it's a wonderful, wonderful system. And I talk to clients across the globe, and they tell me the same type of feedback every time. Yes, we love it. And then I start digging deeper, and I ask a bunch of questions. That looks just like me, but that's not the slide we want to be on. There we go. I ask the question, and I ask the question of, what do you love about SharePoint? And they say, well, we like the interface, we like what it does for us, we like how it's changed our organization. That's wonderful, that's good, that's true. And then I ask different details about the implementation. I ask what team they were on. I ask, there's seats up here, come on up. Come on up. All right, stay back there. There are no seats up here, I swear it's all full, no problem. So I start digging a little deeper and I ask questions, and I find out that this is actually the third implementation of SharePoint they've done. Aha. And then I start asking deeper questions, and I ask, so how did the first implementation go? Oh, we don't talk about that. Well, where's that project manager? Oh, he left years ago. Right? Everyone kind of disassociates themselves to SharePoint just long enough that they can say, yes, we love it. Right? It works really, really well. But this stance, this position, is not what I would call great adoption for anything. Right? If your team came in and they were standing in the corner and they didn't actually want to use the product that you had put out, how would you feel as a boss, as a manager, as somebody who was responsible for putting that system in place? Probably not great, right? You wouldn't be very happy with how you had done in the implementation. And what people want is empowerment, right? As staff, we want to hear in our organizations that we are empowered to do the jobs that we have been hired to do. What that means is systems, it means tools, it means that we have enough information within us to get the job done. Now let me ask this question a bit differently. How many of you work for a company? This is not a trick question. Okay. Everyone's looking at me. What? No, okay. So we all work for an organization, right? That means we've all been hired by that organization. Some of us may have even been fired by previous organizations, why we've now been hired, right? And when you were hired in that organization, did somebody sit down with you in your first day, your first week, and have conversations with you about the business? This is how you'll get paid. This is where the bathroom is, or the restroom, or the washroom. Where am I in the world? What do you call it here? I didn't make out toilets, thank you. Right? Everyone sort of has the conversations to learn the things they need to know about the organization. Right? Has everyone seen A Few Good Men, the movie, right? Tom Cruise? There's this great scene where he asks the guy that's on trial how he knew where to eat. Remember this conversation? In one of his retorts, he has this whole thing about how did you know where to eat? He says, oh, I just followed everybody else. Oh, well, that makes perfect sense. But it wasn't in the manual, right? With SharePoint, everyone expects to have the manual. I need this thing, this document, which I can read, and by reading it, I'm going to be able to use the system. And that's not how SharePoint works. It's not an out-of-the-box system that way, right? You can get in the car and say drive, and you put your foot down, and phew, it goes. But you're going to go through stoplights. You're going to go and hit other people. You're going to have all sorts of different problems. We don't want that with SharePoint, okay? This is not SharePoint bumper cars. This is SharePoint as an implementation, as a system. This is $1 million implementation plus that you're going to do, and we want you guys to be connected. Okay? Everyone still with me? Okay, bless you. So we're going to talk about what SharePoint adoption is all about and how we got there. We'll talk about defining the enterprise application. We will go through the 10 steps to adoption. And these are my 10 steps. So I've seen similar talks done in different places on different technologies, and everyone's got their own steps. So work with me, because this is the best way to get SharePoint adopted as far as I'm concerned from a strategic perspective. We'll talk about maximizing tech. And finally, we'll do some lifecycle feedback, some lessons learned. We will go from there. There's a few seats on the side. There's a few seats on that side if you want to be in front of the camera. Just smile as you walk by, okay? And here we go. So about me, how many of you were in my session yesterday? Perfect. Thank you guys for coming back. I apologize that you have to look at this slide again, but it looks just like this. So they throw me in front of the camera and they say, don't smile. How do you not smile? And it comes out like that. So anyway, that's what it is. So I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Empty Cubicle. Empty Cubicle was started in October in Toronto, which is where I'm from, where I live, and where I flew in from yesterday, and where I'm flying back to tomorrow. So if you have any questions for me, make sure you grab me today, okay? So it's a very short trip. Empty Cubicle is the next best thing in actually HR technology. It's going to be the next job search engine using data and verified data to match candidates to employers. All right, so what we're building is the world's largest database of true trusted information. And if you want more information on that, I can provide it to you afterwards. But thank you to everyone for giving me the opportunity to chat with you today. I am a SharePoint MVP, and it's great to be here in London to deliver this. So everyone still with me? Excellent. That's enough about me. Let's talk about you guys and who is in the room. So how many of you are with small organizations, 1 to 100? Hands up. Very good. Apparently everybody in that section in the back. Medium size, 100 to 1,000. Excellent. Large, 1,000 or over. How many of you put your hands up twice? I saw a few people. I'm not sure. We have people. I have no idea how many people we have in an organization. No problem. Let's talk a little about technology. How many of you are using SharePoint 2007? Hands up. This is where it gets really fun, okay? Who's on 2010? 2013? On-prem? I saw that. In the cloud? How many of you are looking for another arm or leg to throw up here in this equation? Right? This happens all the time. Who is still using SharePoint 2003? Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Whether you're using it or not, I appreciate you being honest. Okay? And who in the room is thinking about SharePoint 2016? Look around the room. Hands way up in the air, please. A lot of people are thinking about 2016. Is anybody coming over to Chicago in, 12 days' time for Ignite? Just me, huh? All right. A couple? A few, maybe? So Ignite is coming up, and it's going to be all about 2016 from what I hear, and it will be very interesting, I am sure, especially after the announcement last week. They are slightly delayed in production. So it'll be an interesting time, no doubt. And there I can promise you I will be doing the governance talk. So if you do come out to Ignite, let me know, and I'll make sure to get you registered for that. Let's keep going. Area of responsibility. So as I call out the various roles that you can have in your organization, raise your hand and with pride tell me what you're doing. How many of you, and now let's just look at the titles only, okay? I once had somebody get very mad at me because they said they didn't look like one of the people. And I said, no, we're just looking at the titles. So, any IT pros in the room? Can any of you tell me what an IT pro is? Didn't think so. Okay, any project managers? Okay, developers? End users? Okay, anybody in the C-suite? CIO, CEO, CMO, CXO, C3PO, R2D2? This is as funny as it gets, guys. If you're not loving these jokes, come on. Work with me. The next session's coming at 10:15, okay? It will get better. I want to go back for a second. I asked a few minutes ago about end users. How many of you use SharePoint on a daily, weekly, monthly, annual, biannual, semi-annual basis? Hands up in the air. Okay, that's the answer to how many of you are end users. And it's very important in the adoption conversation that we resonate with titles and we know what it is that we're doing. Because all too often I sit down with customers and they say, we talk about a feedback mechanism. We need some feedback here. And they say, okay, we should bring in some end users for that. And I say, well, don't you use SharePoint? Yes, but I'm not an end user. Why aren't you an end user? Then they get mad at me, right? I'm not an end user, okay. Connect to that message, okay? Let's make sure we recognize that we are all end users of SharePoint. You can save yourself a lot of time and potentially pain by recognizing the role that you play in the organization. Your feedback as an end user is just as good as anybody else's. Okay, now if you want to bring in other people, other roles, other responsibility areas into the conversation, that's different. But knowing that you are an end user, is critical to this conversation, especially on adoption. Now, let's talk a little bit about this thing that they call SharePoint. So the evolution of SharePoint looks something like this. 2003, 2007, 2010, 13. Notice how it went from little portal, right, fun thing in Internet Explorer, all the way through to 2013, right? It got a lot larger. The capabilities got larger, the workloads got larger. Now, in 2013, 2016, we're somewhere between those 2 years right now. So now we have these fun and exciting terms that Microsoft has given us called experiences, management, and extensibility. Because the word portal just isn't sexy anymore, right? Nobody wants to work in a portal. They want to work in an enterprise system, okay? We'll talk all about the enterprise system and the enterprise application in just a couple slides. How many of you are familiar with an old baseball movie? Anybody like baseball? Just me. Thanks, guys. I appreciate that. Work with me here. I probably could have used a better example since I am in London and in Europe. But anyway, so I'm a baseball guy. I play all sorts of sports, being from Toronto. Well, I'm from Connecticut, but being from Toronto, I play hockey. So I have a hockey game tomorrow night that I'm rushing home to play in so that we can win the championship because, I'm slightly competitive. And I will be on the ice at 9:45 Eastern tomorrow night, you can be sure. But as you look at baseball movies, one particular baseball movie comes to mind. It was called Field of Dreams with Kevin Costner. Has everyone seen it? Of course, right? Best baseball movie ever. Good morning. And there was this very famous, a little dark, I apologize, very famous line in Field of Dreams where Kevin Costner's character brings these baseball guys out of the backfield, and that, of course, is not supposed to happen just yet. Thank you. I will control the slides, not you. And there's this great line in the movie where it says, "If you build it, they will come." Right? Anyone remember that? Sort of? Yeah, kind of. Okay, good. You'll learn that even if you don't recall it, I will get much more enjoyment out of this if you just say yes. Okay? So there's this whole conversation he has with essentially himself. If you build it, they will come. Then you have the SharePoint conversation, and this gets changed a little bit, right? Because with SharePoint, it doesn't matter how much you spend on it. You have this shift where it's, if you build it, will they come? Because nobody cares what you spent on it. Nobody cares what the field looks like. Nobody cares how you deployed SharePoint or what it looks like from an experience perspective, from a UI perspective, how pretty it is. We want it to work. All right? It has to work. It has to make me fundamentally better than what I was 5 minutes ago, or I won't use it. Okay, can we all connect with that? And I won't ask you guys to point out any of your bosses that might be in the room, but can anybody put up their hand that they may have perhaps done that in the past? Not with SharePoint, but we rolled something out and I didn't like it, so I kind of did one of these and moved away from it. Right? Don't actually nod, but I know we're all nodding. I see your eyes. You're all looking at me going, how did he know? Right? Because that's life. Life is like that. If you don't like something, you just kind of disassociate to it and you move away from it. And unfortunately, that has massive implications to it. Huge. Because you don't spend $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, pounds, whatever you want to call it, euro, shekels, American dollars, just to move away from it. Right? It doesn't happen that way. So what we're going to do today is talk through the opportunities and the options to get adoption to a much better place with SharePoint. Because, as you may have seen earlier, we have a bit of an issue, which is that inconsistency in SharePoint is a virus. So how many of you have the SharePoint guy in your office? Right, that's the person. How many of you are the SharePoint guy? That's okay too. It's amazing. Hands always go up for that. I am the SharePoint guy. But when I ask if you have a SharePoint guy, nobody puts their hands up. It's okay. The SharePoint guy is a wonderful thing, or girl, or gal, whatever you like, right? It's a wonderful thing, but that can also at times lead to inconsistencies because the SharePoint guy is really into it. Right? They're into it. Nigel here in the front is really into it. I love it. I'm going to come sit in the front. I'm going to listen to everything this guy says, and I'm not going to take anything back with me to the office because I was here, and I get to learn. Nobody else gets to learn, which is okay, Nigel. It's all right. Nigel, I had a pint last night. It's all good now. We're all friends. The reality is, in our organizations, when we roll out technology that maybe we don't like as much as we should, we get a situation like this. There you go. By the way, for anybody interested, I am controlling the slides from my phone, okay? And the reason I say this is not to show off that I have it working, which is a blessing in itself, but I actually show it off because I was once told that I shouldn't be texting during my session. And I said, no, ma'am, I was controlling the slides. And I don't think she believed me, but that's why I'm showing it to you. See how it's the same as that? Okay, it's all good. Inconsistency is a virus. Is this a team? No, this is not a team. Right? I play on a lot of sports teams. We all wear the same blue. Right? Nobody wears the yellow. In cycling, the person that's wearing the different color, one cyclist here is going, yeah, I know what he's going to say. Right? The green jersey, or if you play in the Masters, you play golf. Any golfers? Just me? A couple? Few? Right? You win the green jacket. It's an accomplishment. When you're on a team, there's no green jacket, there's no green jersey. You want everybody to be in the same rank. The problem with this is that when you have one person who's looking a little yellow with what's going on in the organization, you know what they do? They take this thing that they call SharePoint, they find out a different way to use it or a different way to get around the process or the cycle, and you know what they do? They tell all their friends, right? They tell all their friends. And what happens when you tell all your friends what you learned and the way that you have learned to go around the system? Before you know it, things kind of look like that, don't they? All of a sudden, you have all these other people who have taken off the blue jersey, or the green jersey, or the green jacket, and now things are happening a little differently. And you know what that is? You know what that means? Trouble. A lot of trouble. An incredible amount of trouble, because all of a sudden, you're kind of catching up to the blue people, right? You're catching up to the people that have been trained to do things a certain way. And it doesn't matter what you've done to empower your staff, to empower your organization. What matters is that you're able to deliver, and you're able to have people using the system that you've invested in the right way. Everyone still with me? Awesome. Now, where Microsoft has failed us, unfortunately, is that they haven't really done a great job in putting out one system that has forever changed the way we've done business, right? What have they done? They put out 4 systems to forever change the way we've done business. Now there's going to be a 5th. And we can argue later, or arm wrestle later, about whether 2003 will be around and supported when 2016 comes out. Okay, that's a different conversation for another time. But at that point, there could be 5 systems out there that we're trying to navigate and negotiate through. How's that going to go? Remember that SharePoint is not like cars. SharePoint is very different to a car. You can't just step out of your 2011 Mercedes and step into your 2012 Mercedes and think that all of your issues have subsided, right? Oh, it's a different car now. No, no, no. That thing that gave me all those problems, we're good, right? I left it on the lot. I'm driving this one away. It doesn't work like that, unfortunately. What we do have is one of these, a really direct roadmap. It's like walking in London. My goodness, I almost got nailed 3 times walking from the hotel, and the hotel is not far. That's why it says look left, look right. I'm learning. I'm still here. I made it through yesterday, so it couldn't have been that bad. This, unfortunately, is the path that Microsoft gives you. This is what you want to do. Okay, so you guys just take the happy path to SharePoint, which is this little guy here in the middle, right? Get down there, and everything will be well. And what they do is make that very complex. So there's the 2007 sign, there's the 2010 sign, there's the 2013 sign. But if you talk to Microsoft, they will tell you that you just follow the yellow brick road here, right? Not that yellow, not that brick, but that's how you get there. All right, that's very helpful, right? Just go straight. And that's what they call the happy path, or as I call it here, the happy path. There it is. And that's not the reality. The reality is we need steps. Right? We need the 10 steps to adoption in order to get us to where we need to be, to get all of our staff happy and in a place where we can all use SharePoint in a beautiful, happy world. All right? Everyone still with me? Awesome. Let's get to the 10 steps. Everyone ready? Yes. Didn't hear a word. Everyone ready? Yes. Better, still not great. We'll work on that. And I would like to point out that I'm enjoying my delicious coffee, and I just noticed it's actually decaf. So imagine if I had a caffeinated coffee, how quickly I'd be talking. Here are the 10 steps. So first and foremost, create a strategy. I know it's deep, it's really heady. A strategy, I don't know about that. We'll talk through it. First, create a strategy, then get C-level support, then know your audience, then set expectations, then define and create value. Okay. I go through these very quickly because we're going to go through each of them in a couple of slides. So if you're rushing to scratch these down, instead I will pass out a handy business card holder. And if you pass me your business card, not only will we sign you up for a free subscription of Empty Cubicle, we'll also send you the deck. This is the handy business card holder, okay? So we'll pass this around. If you have a business card, drop it in. If you don't, grab my business card on the way out. So these are the first 5. Very good, excellent. I see people taking pictures. Okay. Everyone got the pictures? Not of me. Everyone good? Okay. Excellent. Next 5. Here we go. Then we're going to set metrics. We're going to do automation. We'll look at using what you have. Crazy, but it might just work. Okay. Use what you actually have. We'll talk about smart governance. Yes, I did create that what's that thing called? Thank you. Acronym. That's why I bring somebody with me who knows what I'm going to say. And then we prototype and pilot. Wow, that looks like the E should almost be beside prototype. That's okay. We'll work on that. Yes, I created that acronym all by myself. So let's first talk about a strategy. How many of you have a strategy for SharePoint? This is not a trick question. A few brave souls that are going to say, yeah, more or less. We're using it, so we must have had some sort of strategy to get us there. Okay, maybe not. Now, what about having a strategy for adoption? Whoa, a strategy for adoption. We need like 2 strategies? No. I don't know if I can do that, right? That might be a problem. Let's talk about what your strategy can look like. And if you were with me yesterday, I do apologize that I'm going to show you the same slide. But your strategy for SharePoint is hopefully something that has been created, worked on, chiseled, and created into this beautiful, living, breathing thing. Because remember, our strategies are not static. You don't put them in place and stand there, right? They're dynamic, they change, they're flowing, right? They're like a river. And things are always going to continuously move. We need those corporate goals and objectives. We need to get people involved. And what I did was create a strategy. Now get your cameras ready because this gets exciting. That wasn't a joke. But I see that we're not connecting on that message, so we'll work on that. What we need is a strategy that makes sense to the organization. That doesn't mean something at the 60,000-foot level. That means something that we can all sort of live and breathe around, okay? So what I did was create this journey, the SharePoint Journey, which I will point you to. It's online and all over the place in the SharePoint world. And the SharePoint Journey looks like this. Okay, any questions? No? Good. So from here, no, I'm just... This guy in the front's like, oh, I almost got the picture. Okay, here's the SharePoint Journey. The SharePoint Journey, we're only going to go to the BI and dashboarding piece. So we're just going to take the first 3. The SharePoint Journey, which is online at ericriz.com/the SharePoint Journey, and I believe there's dashes between the and SharePoint and Journey. It starts with executive buy-in. That's where you work with your C-levels, your CIO, CEO, CXO, CMO, R2D2, all those people, to create a strategic commitment and a roadmap so that we can all be connected to the same message. That means we know what our internal goals are, we know where we expect to be, we know how technology is going to help us get there, and we know that we have the dollars and cents to commit to this thing that they call SharePoint. Excellent. From there, we're going to go to portal adoption. Enterprise-wide portal adoption starts with each of you and ends with each of you. It does not end when you have 1,000 people online. It ends when you know that everyone is using SharePoint in the same way. What that means is create standard functionality that can be used across the organization so that when IT has a conversation with sales or with marketing or with manufacturing or with the mailroom, I can say, hey, did you see that new feature they put into SharePoint? Somebody will say, yeah, it was great, right? We're all talking about the same message. It's not that IT has a very different way of looking at and using SharePoint. That's how you empower people. That's how you create a message across the organization that everyone can connect to, is with standardized functionality. No, that doesn't mean you should forever have just that functionality, but it means when you're rolling out or you're rolling out something new, be smart about it. All right? Do it in a connected way so that everybody is using SharePoint in the same type of interface with the same type of experience. There's that E word again, experience. Okay? From here, we go to Information Hub. Oh boy, information. Now he wants us to use this thing for a very specific way, and I do. How many of you have ever been involved in a SharePoint project where SharePoint turned into this replacement for our H drive, L drive, Q drive, X drive, doesn't matter drive? This is where everyone smiles at me. How did he know that, right? Well, it pretty much happens everywhere. All right? And this was very popular in the evolution slide, no pun intended. Right? In the evolution slide, this was very popular in 2003. When people said, wait a second, we can get this prettier way of using our shared drive? My Windows Exploder look? Cool. Let's just throw all of our stuff out there and see what happens to it. And what happened to it? It went there to die, didn't it? Right? Because you moved all this legacy stuff, the stuff that we didn't need in the first place, and you continue to use the one file that you were always using before. So it's not exactly what I would call a mega data document management system. So what we're going to do is transform to a place where work gets done. A question I get asked all the time is, Eric, how will I know when SharePoint is complete, when my project is done? And after a good 3 to 4 weeks of consulting, I can say, well, when your people, when your staff, and take this back with you, when you get back to the office on Monday or Friday or whenever you're going back to the office, take this back with you. When your people go into SharePoint to get their job done, to get their job function done, to complete a function that they have to do for work in SharePoint, then you've done it well. and you've put SharePoint in and implemented it in such a way that it's now an impactful system that people are using properly. That's how you know when things are done. Okay? Do we all agree with that? Just me, huh? Okay. This happens a lot. That's all right. But having the information hub is when you know that SharePoint has been deployed successfully because you have everything in a connected way where you know that you're looking for the information you need and you know where to find it. Now recognize that search and find are two different things. All right? Let me give you an example. If I was to open my closet and look for my black sweater, and notice I say look for my black sweater, and I look for my black sweater, am I searching for it or am I trying to find it? Not all at once, okay? Anyone? Am I searching for it or am I trying to find it? Trying to find it. Why am I trying to find it? Because if I don't own a black sweater and I open up my closet and I'm searching for it, someone's going to think I'm crazy, right? You don't have a black sweater. What are you doing here? But when we go online and we want to search for something, what do? Don't be smart. Come on, guys. Right? We Google it with Bing, right? We open up Bing. And these are the jokes, guys. You try making this funny. Come on. Right? We open up Bing and we search for something. We put in information. We type a few words and we hit enter. And we hope that it comes back with something relevant. Because when the return search results, you just hit the first one and you see if that's what you wanted. Right? Because you control the query. So when I open my closet, it's not look for red sweater, it's look for black sweater, and I'm trying to find it because I know it's there. So putting all of your information in the right way with the right data and the right connections behind it, and the right taxonomy, I said that T word before 10, that's not good. That means that you actually have the enterprise information hub that we need. And remember, this all flows down from strategy, and this is all part of adoption. We need to have a message we can all connect to. Okay? Now, there's a reason why I stop here, and I don't talk about BI and dashboarding and critical process and StratOps on the far right. The reason why is because that stuff doesn't matter, okay? Well, it matters, of course it matters, but it doesn't matter now. Too many customers will come to me and say, Eric, do me a favor. You know that SharePoint thing? Yes, I know that SharePoint thing. Yeah, we want it. Can you come give us a dashboard? No, I can't come give you a dashboard. Well, why not? It says right here on the box that it does dashboards. I want a dashboard. Cool. That sounds like a really good time, a lot of fun. And I say, all right, well, let's look at this differently. Let's go and let's figure out the information that you actually want. What data do you want to see? What do you want to see on that dashboard? Oh, all of a sudden I want sales figures, and I want performance reporting, and I want my 360s for my staff. I want all that stuff out there. And I say, well, where is it? I don't know. Right? It's in that little black box, right? No one knows where to find that information, but they all want it up in their dashboard. That doesn't work like that, right? We have to sort of reset the bar and start this a bit differently. So don't worry too much about everything to the right of BI and dashboarding. Start your strategies with the stuff that makes sense. All right? I'm going to go have more of my decaf. Y'all still with me? Excellent. So from here we go to C-level support. Now I will never, because we're all friends, I will never tell anybody outside of this room what the results were of this poll. All right? That's my disclaimer for you. But how many of you know who is leading the SharePoint charge in your organization? Hands up. That's not bad, unless I know you very, very well. And I knew you were going to say that and put up your hand, whether I asked you what you had for breakfast or how your implementation was going. But if you're able to lead the charge and know who leads the charge within your SharePoint environment, you're in a very good position. Let me ask the same question a different way. Hands up if you do not know who's leading the SharePoint charge in your organization. Now, I know that half the room didn't put their hands up the first time. So either we have a trust issue here or something very strange happened between my last question and this question. Either way, let's just go with this. I'll give you a nickel's worth of free advice, as we say in Canada. If you don't know who's leading the charge, go back to your office and find out who's leading the charge. You need to know who's holding that megaphone, right? You need to know who that person is who's making the calls. You need to know who is involved in your SharePoint project. You need to know who the person is that can make a difference. It's far cooler over here than it is over there, as much as I want to be over there. So that's why I'm hanging out over here. You need to know who's in charge, right? You can't have the strategic conversations we need to have. You can't empower people. You can't put out the messaging that we need for SharePoint if you don't know who is leading the charge and who's got the megaphone. Whether or not they have the tie, it's up to you. All right, but know who's leading that megaphone, and please, when you get back to the office, please find out, if you don't already know, find out who's doing that. All right, because that's critical, very, very critical to this conversation. Here comes the audience participation part of today's session. Everyone excited? Just me, huh? Okay. Adoption does not just happen. I'm going to put up a slide. It's going to have a few pictures on it. This is one of those like memory association games. It gets really fun. Okay? It's going to have 8 or so images on it. And then I'm going to ask you guys to tell me where they all go when I go to the next slide. Remember those games when we were kids? No, that's not what this is doing. Here's the slide. Boom. 8 very small, rarely heard of systems that are out there. Okay? We have Instagram, Spotify, O365, Dropbox, Foursquare, Facebook. Anybody on that Facebook thing? People still use that, huh? Okay. Hulu Plus, all that stuff. Tell me something. Which one of these systems was the fastest to get to 1 million subscribers? And do not Google this with Bing, okay? You'll totally wreck this for me. Instagram, O365, yell it out. Everyone's on. Clearly a Microsoft crowd, okay? Anybody else? Facebook? Anybody Facebook? Don't just follow me. Come on, guys. Foursquare? Empty Cubicle? Just making sure you guys are with me here. Dropbox? Okay, so I've heard just about everything at this point. Spotify is up there as well. So the answer to the question might surprise you. It was not Empty Cubicle, sadly. Would not make my shareholders happy. It was not Office 365. It was not Dropbox. There was only a few left. It was, in fact, Instagram. Now, this is an interesting fact, okay? And not just because I created the slides, but because it is an interesting fact. Why was it Instagram? Anybody want to yell out some options for me? Why was it Instagram?
Niche market, I guess.
Niche market.
Simple to use.
Simple to use. Social media. Everyone wants to see pictures of cats, right? Here's why Instagram was fastest. It was fastest because Facebook and Foursquare set the table. Right? 10 years ago, when Facebook was coming out, it's really been 10 years. 10 years ago, when Facebook was coming out, people didn't know what Facebook was, but they learned. Why? Because their friend told them that this thing was coming out called Facebook. It was kind of cool. You should try it. Go create a subscription for it and test it out. And then they put up pictures of their cats and their kids and their dogs and whatever else, and they sent them to all their friends. And the next thing, they had 84 bazillion people on Facebook. All right, that's a real statistic, bazillion. All right, that's real. The reason why Instagram was the fastest was because when Instagram came out, everyone was like, oh, cool. This is a faster way to put my pictures of my cats online and send them to my friends. Wicked, awesome, fantastic, right? Fabulous. We want that. So I'm going to go and sign up for that. So it only took them 2.5 months to reach 1 million subscribers versus Facebook, which took close to a year. Now, why am I talking about this? I've been trying to figure it out for about 5 minutes. The reason I'm talking about this is because, put this into a SharePoint context, okay? So how many of you are using a version of SharePoint which is considered an add-on or an upgrade to your first version? How many of you went with 2007 back in 2007 and are now using 2010 or 2013? Right, multiples, right? Sure. So when you first came out with SharePoint, your adoption was around here. It took 10 to 13 months. It took a lot of time to get people to use it, whether they liked it or not. But hopefully, with your subsequent versions or subsequent implementations or subsequent components that you've installed or implemented, you have a much better subscription uptake time. Right? People started to use it much quicker, much faster. Why? Because you didn't have to train them on how to log in. You didn't have to train them on where to find their stuff. It was all just kind of there and intuitive, and people like that. So when you're working on your adoption, when you're working on empowering your staff, when you're working on generating and cultivating your subject matter experts, keep this slide in mind. Recognize that if you're doing it for the first time, it's going to take some time. But if you're doing it subsequent times with similar functionality and people know what it's all about already, that's when life gets much better and you can expect a quicker uptake. You've been a wonderful audience for feedback. Thank you. As we get to the next slide, here we go. Now, there are a couple of challenges of adoption, right? If there weren't challenges in adoption, then you wouldn't be in this room, I wouldn't have a job, so on and so forth. Okay, a few challenges of adoption. Resources, scope, time, money. Well, that sounds pretty standard as far as things go. How many of you have had significant issues with one or more of those things on your SharePoint project? Sure. right? How many of you want to connect to the resource message? We had resource problems. Sure. We had money problems. We had time problems. This, unfortunately, is life, right? And this isn't life as far as SharePoint goes. This is life as far as any IT type project will go, or any project will go, right? We have massive construction. To give you a construction example, Toronto's hosting the Pan Am Games later this summer from July to August, and I intend to not be in the city when this goes on. But they're hosting the Pan Am Games. They're expecting all these billions of people. They're going to shut down lanes. And there was this whole piece in the paper over the weekend where it talked about how many millions and millions and millions of dollars over budget all these projects are, right? Construction projects, they have to figure out where to put the opening ceremonies. It has to go into a stadium. The stadium's not ready in time. It's going to be a disaster. But you know what? Somehow, by some miracle, probably by tax dollars, all those projects are going to be flush with money in the next 10 minutes. Little media coverage and everyone's happy. Does that happen in SharePoint? No. Right? People don't just come in and write more checks for SharePoint, so what do? You have to balance. But how does this relate to adoption? You have to make sure that when you have issues on your SharePoint project, you're still empowering your people. You are still telling them, easy for me to say, you are still telling them and communicating that the issues they have in the organization are actually going to be solved, and they will still be solved, and they will still be matched, and the promises that were made are still going to be delivered upon. Now that isn't a bunch of creative messaging, right? It isn't a bunch of fancy conversations you're going to have internally. This is a real conversation. So what you have to do is stress the positive, okay? Stress the positive. Don't talk about the fact that you are significantly over budget, or don't talk about the fact that 5 more resources could get us what we need. When we're looking at this strategically, put your strategic hat on and put yourself in a place where this stuff makes sense, which means don't promise the world, right? It means find out what your end users are expecting and deliver upon those promises, or at a minimum, work with them to bring their 80,000 foot level of I want a Ferrari to I'm going to be happy over here with my little Ford. All right? Work to bring the messaging down so that you can deliver upon what you know you have budget, time, resources, and functionality for. Don't promise the world. That's the quickest way to kill your project, is to promise the world. I have yet seen a project, any project, but a SharePoint project, where somebody has promised the world, been able to deliver on it, and had happy resources. That's not how these things happen. All right, let's keep going. How do you adopt? How do you adopt this thing that they call SharePoint? Well, it's not easy, because putting out a system that actually met our objectives simply does not mean that people are just going to use it. Anybody disagree with that comment? Of course not. So how are we going to adopt this thing? Adoption happens in many different ways. What a lot of project teams like to do is they finish off their project, and what do? That's right, they throw a party, right? Because the best way to get people involved is to feed them. Certainly gets my attention, right? We feed them, we give them some coffee, some donuts, and the next thing they're using SharePoint. Not exactly correct, but an interesting way of going about it if you care to go down that method. What we need is to identify these things. We need a mindset, we need roles, we need skills, we need partners, and we need tools. Now we know there are lots of partners and tools that can be used and leveraged within SharePoint, right? There's somebody in this room who's got a killer tool with SharePoint, and I'm sure the only reason why she's here is to talk about it. It's not to see me, I can tell you that. That was a joke between she and I, and I'm sure she's smiling, though I haven't looked at her yet. But anyway, now, from a mindset perspective, what do you need to do? What do you need to sell within the SharePoint context to get your SharePoint world adopted internally? You need to sell the value, right? When I'm out talking about an empty cubicle in front of our customers, in front of our stakeholders, I'm talking about the value. They don't want to hear how we created it or what the algorithms do or how you get that match. They want to hear what the value is. What's in it for me, right? WIIFM. Go back to your office, write that down on the wall, and everybody that will come in will ask you, what does that mean? That's the what's in it for me conversation. And within SharePoint, you can get some very interesting conversations with those 5 letters. What's in it for me? That means you set the value, you set the mindset, and you shaped people around what the expectations are going to be. So somebody's expecting a pretty, bless you, if someone's expecting a pretty dashboard, don't don't go into this deep conversation about data. Don't go into this deep conversation about how they log into the system. Focus on the dashboard. Focus on changing their mindset into recognizing what they need, what they want, and delivering on that promise. From there, everything else is pretty easy, right? Roles, skills, well, these are all good things. If you have a defined team, then you have roles already out there. If you have skills on your team, you want to leverage those skills and make sure that the people who are using SharePoint in a proof of concept or a prototype or in a segmented environment are doing so in such a way that it can maximize the end value of what you're delivering. That means if you're on a project team for SharePoint, you need to be using SharePoint. I know it's crazy, but you need to be using SharePoint on your project. Do you know how many times I've been asked, Eric, so we've got the SharePoint thing, and we're going to be going live in December. What do you think we should use to manage our own SharePoint project? Right? I've never done that, not in front of a customer, but that's the reality, right? Here's a crazy concept. Let's use SharePoint, right? It makes sense. But the fact that people are so disconnected at that level and they don't see the forest through the trees, they don't see that what they're doing can actually be used on their own project is kind of telling in what you're putting out there, isn't it? So when you get back to the office, let's have that conversation internally. Let's figure out what you are using, what you could be using, and how you can be empowering and making people better SharePointers and have them in a better connected place than just, yeah, we're using this thing, I think it's SharePoint, and life is good. In the earlier days of my career when I was doing true SharePoint implementations in what I call true, in the 2003-2005 timeframe, I would go out to social functions, bars, whatnot, and I would sit and talk to friends, and they would say, so what are you doing now? I'd say, oh, I'm implementing this thing called SharePoint. I'm this consultant, wonderful, wonderful. And they would say, oh, that's cool, what is that? And I would say, oh, it's a portal, and it's this and it's that. And I would say, he would say, or she would say, have I ever used it? No, I don't know. So I would reverse the conversation. So who do you work for? And they would say, I work for HSBC. Okay, now I happen to know that HSBC has one of the largest SharePoint implementations out there. So I start to peel back the layers of the onion, and I say, what do you guys use? 5 minutes later, I give it a little break, and I say, what do you guys use for reporting? Or what are you using for your documents? Or what are you using for search? And the response was, oh, we have this portal. And I would say, well, that's SharePoint. And shock and awe comes over their face. I had no idea. Right? If you don't communicate to your people, you can't expect them to communicate to each other or understand what's out there. So make sure you have that connected message. Make sure you're doing the right things to empower your people and provide that connected message around SharePoint. Because if you don't have that, you are in big trouble. I spoke a few minutes ago about actually using the tool and using see how that went? Wasn't that cool? Right? Using what you have now. So that means identifying what you have as far as the needs and the wants of your system. We're getting a little requirements heavy here. Right? So when you have your conversations with everybody, make sure that you talk about what you need versus what you want. We all know that we need lots of things in this world to sustain ourselves, air, food, water to start. But when you're having requirements conversations, easier for me to say, it's the decaf. When you're having the rec conversation, make sure that you're recognizing the difference between needs and wants, because of course, when you sit down and have those conversations, your users are going to ask you for everything. Right? They'll ask you for the world. I want everything that you have to offer. But that isn't a need, that's a want. So make sure that you're identifying those properly. Look at what you've currently got in place, remembering that SharePoint is an enterprise system, and Microsoft's dream is to have SharePoint as the nucleus, right, as that centrifuge, as that midpoint of your connected systems, and having all of your information connected into SharePoint. Make sure that you know what systems have been created, what's been deployed, and how you can bring that data into SharePoint. There are systems out there within your organizations, each of you, I can promise you, that would be better off on a shelf somewhere, and you can port that data into SharePoint. Whether you send it over, whether you import it, whether you migrate it, it doesn't matter, but you would actually save money by doing it that way. People don't recognize that. They hear that SharePoint's coming down the line, they think, right? We're just going to stay in our little box here, and that's not exactly a connected, collaborative message. Legacy systems, okay, we'll leave that where it is. And people who want a system based on old processes, recognize that those people exist. Do not recreate the wheel by implementing SharePoint. Don't put functionality out there that just does whatever you're doing now. Quick tip on adoption, the best way to get people adopted after you feed them is to make the process better and then use SharePoint to show them how it operates in a better process and a better function. Right? We know that our businesses run on a process. We can make that process better, and you can use and leverage SharePoint to do that. That's a promise to you. All right, so figuring out what it is, that I can't do in an hour, but I beg all of you to get that level of commitment within the organization and work with your people and your staff and your systems to get that process to a better place and use SharePoint to do that. Because at the end of the day, we recognize that we are creating users. Users. There's our users, right? There he is. Look at that. He's looking at a Microsoft screen. What a shock. Right? We're creating users. We have to get into the head of that person. We have to be able to make SharePoint a smiley, happy place for people to go and to work. All right? So make sure that you're in a place where you're putting the right messaging behind that user to get them to adopt SharePoint the right way. From here we go to tools and techniques. How am I doing on time? 10 minutes. Very good. Then it's coffee time. We want to define and create value. How do we define and create value? Well, we need to first define some principles and goals for what it is we're going to be doing. We need to classify business information. We need to look at developing an education strategy and then develop an ongoing plan. That's all good, fine, and well. But how do we do those things? How many of you have an education strategy to develop? A couple brave souls are going like this. Right? I think they're just kind of tired. Whew. I missed my gym this morning, right? No, developing an education strategy means that each of our staff are aware of and know where to get support and how often they will be helped and taught through this thing they call SharePoint. It means they know that every other Friday there's a brown bag lunch that we're doing in the cafeteria where I can sit down with our team and talk through my problems. And maybe they'll bring in some guy to talk to us and empower us and tell us what SharePoint's going to do. Or maybe we're going to all get together and watch a webinar for free that's going to evolve and change us and push the education conversation so we can be trained a little more. That's wonderful. Then an ongoing plan. An ongoing plan is when you know what's coming out. It's when you know what is going to be developed within SharePoint, and it's when you know that a particular piece of functionality is coming out and you can actually shoot for it and look forward to it. But all this is for naught if you don't have the right training from the get-go. Now, how do you know when you have the right training? This is a big part of adoption. Many of you have been trained on SharePoint at some point in time. So for those of you that didn't put up your hands, we know that we're all end users. How did you learn how to use SharePoint? Trial and error? Sure, right? Trial and error, that's not a good thing. Have any of you ever gone into the ER, the emergency room, for whatever reason? All right, so a quick story for you in our last 5 minutes. So I mentioned earlier I'm a hockey player. So about 5 years ago, for those of you that watch hockey, have you ever seen one of those plays where two guys go into the corner to get the puck, one guy comes out, one guy lies on the ice until they stop the play and they bring out the stretcher? Okay, that was me. Okay, that was me, and I was like this before, so it's all good. So the two of us go into the corner. I honestly, to this day, could not tell you what happened. Somehow, I'm on the ice. Okay, there was a check involved. I'm lying on the ice. They bring the stretcher off. They put me in the neck thing and the whole production, and the next thing I'm in an ambulance, and they wheel me into the ER. My skates are still on. Okay, as is the rest of my equipment, and I lie in there, and the doctor comes in. What's the first thing he says to me? I heard it. Where does it hurt? Where does it hurt, right? He says, where's your pain? He doesn't say, hey, did you win? Right? Because he doesn't care at that point. He's not a fan. He didn't buy a ticket for the game. Nobody will buy a ticket to come watch my games, I can tell you that. Right? He says, where does it hurt? Now, put this into the education perspective. Put this into the SharePoint perspective. When was the last time that either the person with the megaphone that we saw a few slides ago asked you where your pain is with SharePoint or where your business pain is that we can fix with SharePoint? When was the last time that happened for you? I don't see any smiling faces. Nobody's even looking at me at this point, right? Because it's never happened. And that's really sad. That's not how you adopt, right? If that guy had walked into the room and said, so, got any plans on Saturday? I would have had the same response that you guys just had to me, which was, who cares, right? That's not going to sell anybody on what we're doing. You've got to hit the message. You've got to know what question to ask. You have to know what's going to deliver. And all of this, from the education strategy to the ongoing plan to the principles and goals to the business information, these are the things that sell SharePoint. So if you're missing one or all of these or any of these, you need to go back and get your work done. You need to do some work to figure out how you can get people to adopt SharePoint better, because that's what people want. It isn't about making sure that the logo is in the right place or the right shape or the right color or something else. It's making sure that you are using SharePoint to maximize business efficiency and make us and make our organizations better places. Make SharePoint the place where people want to go to get work done, not the place where they just kind of go because they have to and it's part of their jobs, right? That's behind the value message, is making sure that people are going to use SharePoint and use what you put out there. Tools and techniques, well, we know that it's all about sharing. We know, we talked earlier about the difference between wants and needs. We know there's all sorts of different tools out there. If you have a specific need within your organization and you want to go to where, I think we're on 2, so the 3rd floor to the expo hall and talk to vendors, great. If you have a specific need that you want an unbiased opinion on, Heather Newman will be happy to give you an unbiased opinion right there. Now, I'll be happy to give you an unbiased opinion afterwards and let you know who to talk to about certain things, so just let me know and ask me. I'll be happy to help. But we need to know that what this is all about is connecting to capabilities that are going to solve a problem. That's why you guys are all here, because you're using SharePoint to solve business problems. And we want to get you to the best place to adopt SharePoint, but adopt a SharePoint world that's going to solve your problems. We know that through alignment, value is realized. So this whole conversation has been based on interesting animation. There we go. We know that this whole conversation has been based on strategy. It's been based on adoption. It's been based on that connected message. You've heard me say it at least 10 times. But through alignment, value is realized. So knowing that you have alignment amongst your teams, amongst your business, amongst SharePoint, means that you're going to have a much better, happier place to go back to in the office. Remember as well that there's no I in team, but there is in raise. And most of us, after we've been, thank you. Most of us, after we've been, I figured that out myself too. Most of us, after we've been with our organizations for a certain period of time, expect a raise, don't we? Right? In Canada, we call it cost of living, 2, 3, 4% a year. It goes up and life is good. And that's called value, right? That's called realizing that what you're doing, what you're using, the value that you have as an employee is being realized. But we want that same value in our tools. And the way that we get that value out of our tools is by investing in our people. That's why you guys are all here. So take the information you're learning this week, take it back to your organizations, and have these conversations with your teams. Okay? On the adoption side, this is one of my favorite points to talk about. Balance of resources giving to system versus adoption. How many of you are on a SharePoint team that has anywhere from 0 to 100 people on it? That was a trick question. All hands should go up. Thank you. It's still only 10 o'clock, guys. So if you're on a SharePoint team, then you're likely involved somewhere within the implementation, and you should have, now don't shoot the messenger when I say this, but you should have about 20% of your team dedicated to adoption. Shock and awe, right? Are you crazy? We don't have anybody dedicated to adoption. We have a 20-person team, no one's on adoption. You know what that means? What that means is when you go back to the office and you have these conversations, they're going to look at you like you have 3 heads, which you don't. All right, this is a true message, 20%. What it means is you're not going to deliver. I have a quick story for you, and we're going to run into the break very quickly. So I had a conversation with a customer that I was contracting for about 5 years ago. And I was sitting down. They had a huge adoption problem. They'd rolled out SharePoint 3 times. Yes, this is how quickly I always speak. So they rolled out SharePoint 3 times, and I sat down with the executive assistant to the CEO. Her job was to bring in the attachments that come into his email box and upload them into SharePoint. That wasn't a joke. That's really what she has to do. So what happens is, this is actually a good time to put up this slide. So what happens is, I sit down with her, and she has this incredibly pained look on her face. And I say, well, what's wrong? And she says, this thing just takes way too long to do what I need to do. And I said, all right, well, show me what you do. So she goes through the process. All right, she opens up his email box. She takes the attachments. She puts them onto her desktop. She puts them all in a folder. Then she opens SharePoint. She has to go 8 sites down to get to the page she needs to get to in order to hit the box to actually open the upload dialog, in order to hit browse, in order to find out where she put them, in order to select them all, in order to click OK. And then she waits and ticks and ticks and ticks until they all upload. Right? How many times do you do this, I ask her. She says, anywhere from 5 to 8 times a day. every time she does this, because she's not dealing with the server in-house, she's dealing with a server 2 hours away, it takes about 5 minutes to do this, and she does this 8 times a day. Well, math was never my specialty, but I know that's about 40 minutes, right? We all agree with this? So by the time she actually does it, let's say it's an hour of her day that she spends doing this, and it's a very painful process for her. Now, what part of that process takes the longest? It's actually getting to 8 sites, because it isn't a direct connection, right? She clicks and waits and clicks and waits and clicks and waits. So 3.5 minutes of that 5 minutes is spent clicking and waiting for the site to open. So I was able to fix this for her like that. What did I do? Anybody? I hear favorites. I hear shortcut. That is the correct answer, right? She thought I was brilliant. Okay, and I didn't correct her, right? Because an expert is someone who just knows a little bit more than you do. All I did was take that, create a favorite, drop it down, put a shortcut on her desktop, and she was able to get to that 8th site by clicking that one button, and it saved her hours every week. Hours every week, right? That is so painful to hear, to listen to, but it saved her hours every week. So remember that when we are dealing with the adoption conversation, we're dealing with value statements, and we're dealing with trying to get SharePoint to a better place as an organization. It's sometimes the simplest things, not the most complex of things, that will get people to adopt SharePoint quicker. And please, please, please recognize that. Success and failure, know that it culturally takes anywhere from 18 to 36 months for stuff to stick in your organization. All right, recognize that, take that back with you. Think of the slide with Facebook and all the other systems and Instagram, right? Recognize that it's going to take time to do the stuff that we want to do. I promise we talk about governance. Where's my handy business card holder? It's around somewhere, that pretty glass, thank you. So if you drop a card in there, we'll drop these off to you. Smart, sensible, meaningful, articulate, real, and tactical. I made that up myself, right? All that stuff makes sense when you're dealing with governance, when you're dealing with creating processes and systems that make sense. Create a governance policy that can actually embrace the organization, not restrict the organization. All right, very important message to take back, and all of the text around this means exactly that. All right, we want to get systems and policies in place that make sense. Don't limit people. We have a process in place at Empty Cubicle where we will not, to give you an example, we will not email a document back and forth between ourselves unless we really need to. We have everything out on our portal, on SharePoint, on that black ether box that's out there, and we actually have a penalty. We have a penalty if you email a document unnecessarily back and forth. The penalty is a quarter, like 25 cents, and you drop it in the, if you ever come to our office, I'll show you where the jar sits, right? You drop it in the jar, and at the end of the year, we donate it all to charity. Empty Cubicle matches what's in the jar. I won't tell you what we donated last year, but it was more than 25 cents, and that's a very simple way to create a policy that makes sense, that everyone can connect to, everyone can drop in a quarter, and it actually does work with them and limit them and show them that what they're doing is not correct, and there's a better way to do that. From here, I'm going to slide down to one of our last slides, and we'll go to summary, as I said. So focusing on the 10 steps. Focusing on the 10 steps looks like this. First and foremost, stay focused. All right? We know that adoption is not going to be quick. We know that it's probably going to be a little painful. We know that it isn't something that we're programmed to do. We're not programmed to embrace and nurture and hug each other when we're trying to use something, but that's what we need to do. We need to have those conversations to make it meaningful. And those conversations start with identifying the pain. They start with aligning strategically. They talk about creating value, and my hope for all of you is that you execute flawlessly. All right, now as I wrap up, I want to quickly talk about the community, because you guys are all part of the SharePoint community. And the SharePoint community is very vast, and a lot of it is online, right? So if we're not connected socially, how many of you are on Twitter? Or as my mother calls it, the Twitter, right? If you're on the Twitter, then I expect you guys to follow me at Riz-Insights. That's how you can pick up the slides. That's how you can figure out where I'm going to be. That's how you can find out what's happening in the world. I write a bunch of articles every month that show up on ericriz.com. They show up on itunity.com. They're all over the place, and this is all stuff that I tweet about. So be social, guys. Go out there. Don't go back to the office and just sort of sit in your box and figure out how to guide yourselves through these questions and these problems that you have around SharePoint. Be social. Go online. Right? Talk to the shows. Talk to the people. Talk to the speakers. We're all here for you, and we're here to engage with you. So connect to me through all those methods. Wow, that looks just like me. And I really do this. I didn't realize I did this until I saw this picture. But my email is up there, eric@emptycubicle.com, @RizInsights we talked about for Twitter. ericriz.com/li will land you right on my LinkedIn page. You can add me. You can tell me that we met here, and I'll be happy to connect with you. And that's the community message, okay? So make sure that you embrace and connect with everybody that is here to help you, because that's what we're all here for and to do, and we would all love to do that. So without further ado, I want to thank you guys very much for coming today. We do a whole evaluation session, so if you love the session, make sure that you write down my name, Eric Riz. Make sure you recognize the scale, right? So don't give me all ones, and then say, Eric was the best speaker I've ever heard, right? Because I've seen that before too. So please keep that stuff in mind. If you didn't like the talk today, then unfortunately I can't give you the hour back, but when you fill out your evaluation, my name is Jeremy Thake, okay? Thank you guys very much. Have a great day.